Alright folks, so we are going to cut our willow coppice, or pollards. We're going to cut our willow pollards today. So it is time to get going into that. It is end of the first week of February, starting into the second. Today's February 10th. So I'll normally cut anywhere between middle of February to middle of March. You really want to make sure that they haven't started to leaf out yet, so that the buds haven't swollen at all. Because when they start to swell, that means moisture has started, or the sap has started to run up the trunk again and to get to the tips. So we don't want to waste any of that energy, any of that stored sugars and carbohydrates in the roots. We want to make sure that all the energy that the tree has to give to that, it gives to new growth, not growth that we're removing. So we want to make sure that we don't do that at a time when it starts to warm up a bit. And for a lot of the temperate climates in the world, that is that February to March, or at least northern hemisphere temperate climates, right? Not southern hemisphere. So that's about now. When I do this, normally I use a pair of loppers. And we've got these. If you've watched some of the rest of our videos, I have a video specifically talking about this, about why we grow them like this. So if you want to see that and like why we coppice willow and pollard willows, you can go watch that video. I'll throw it up in the link things right here, or maybe it's right there. I can never remember when I'm filming which side that lands on. Normally I use loppers. This year I have an electric chainsaw, so I'm crossing my fingers that goes a little bit faster. It won't be as clean it cuts, but it'll be faster, and that is really what takes forever on these. So as you can see how dense the stems are, and this is our 3 big ones, but then I have 70 or 80 in the backyard right now to cut. And then we've got all the little ones over there, and the little ones I may still do with the loppers. We'll see, because it's a little tighter. Those are actual coppice beds, and the backyard is our pollard beds, but the pollard bed in the backyard, they're all about 12 to 18 inches high is where the pollards are. These are at about 5 to 6 foot. So with this, yeah, and then we'll do our mulberry this year, and we're gonna do our hackberry. So we're gonna be cutting a lot of the pollards this year and leaving some, because we always want to leave some brushy habitat for everything. This year, what we'll do with the willows is all the willows are going to go to copper cuttings, the bigger cuttings. I'm probably not going to do any of the small cuttings. We normally would do those, but this year I think we're just going to focus on the big cuttings for leaky weirs out in the field, which I'll do a video coming up next soon. We've already got the wood stacked out in several spots out around the farm to do that with, but the rest of it we're probably just going to chip. We can use wood chips in a ton of different spots on the farm. We're putting in some elderberry beds this year, so I could use a lot of wood chips for that. So we're gonna just do, for the most part, our big field cuttings, which are 4 to 5 foot long cuttings of willow, and then the rest will just go to chip. Mulberry, we'll save all of that, and instead of chipping that, I'm gonna use that to smoke meat with. So as soon as we get our smokehouse built, or to use in our little smoker we have right now, I'll be using mulberry cuttings for that, the mulberry pollards. So, all right, let's hop on to cutting this down. Yeah, so that went drastically faster than normal. I will say I did nick the tree once or twice. Well, only one of the trees did I really think I nicked the trunk of it any, and it was the back one, which always does way worse than the two in the front, which are actually the same tree. They just have a split at the base and grow two separate trunks. So we've been doing these for a few years now, and with the willow, I cut every year. And that goes with both the smaller pollards, these bigger pollards, and our coppice. The smaller pollards in the backyard, we're probably going to start switching up to cutting on a 2 to 3 year rotation and cycling through so that some of the stand gets cut, but not all of it every year. We'll do like either half or a third of it will be cut every year, and that will start this year. So everything that is smaller in the backyard will get left, and everything that did really, really good is going to go ahead and get cut. And part of that is because we don't want to cut. Now we got all our mulberry stuff, and mulberry is usually a 2-year cut for us because mulberries fruit on a 2-year cycle. They fruit on that 2nd year wood. So I want that 1st year to grow, and then they'll grow for their 2nd year. They'll skip a cut, right, that we would do for the willows. That 2nd year, they'll produce berries if they're a female tree. If they're a male tree, then what I'm gonna start doing is I'll start tagging the ones that don't fruit on that 2nd year, and those might start getting cut every year because I don't notice that much extra growth on the mulberries that we do leave for 2 years. They shoot up like that 8-foot growth, 6 to 8 foot in 1 year, that 1st year growth. And then the 2nd year, they get some lateral branching that's a couple feet long. They do gain a little bit more height, but it's nothing crazy, not like that first big flush of growth. So I think mulberries could handle an annual cut. So I think we're gonna switch those to that. The hackberries, I think they need 2 to 3 years. And then we're going to also cut some honey locusts and pollard those. So we'll kind of see what that does going forwards from this year, just because I want the shade from them. I don't really need, I eventually would like the firewood from them, but I don't necessarily need that firewood from those. So we'll see how that goes. I'm going to, oh, one thing I thought I'd show off so you can see. So like I said, we cut the willows every year, right? I am 5'10". This is 1 year's worth of growth. Okay, that is almost double my height. That is 10 to 12 foot right there. So that's pretty awesome. That is a lot of energy pulled down by that tree. So lots of carbon. We'll grow this out. Let's move on to some other cuts. So this is some of the biggest sets of our mulberry and hackberry pollards. And you can see I've got this big mulberry here, which was actually cut a bit bigger than it probably should have been for this process to begin. But it's still doable and it functions. This was really just, they were getting kind of tall, and so we weren't getting any sunlight to that yard where the farrowing, with the farrowing yard that we also used to wean piglets in, and so it was never drying out. So we cut it back. We still need some shade in the summer, so we don't want to completely remove the tree, and we don't have that many trees on our property. So everything we do have, it needs to be able to serve those functions. We still want the wildlife benefits of having it. I like being able to strip the leaves for the pigs to eat in the summer, especially when they're in that and it's got that concrete ground. It's only a couple weeks that they're in there, like, well, I say a couple, 6 to 8 weeks. So I like to leave it enough that we can use it, and this makes a great use for it. And like I said, we're going to start using this to smoke all of our bacons and ham and things like that with. See how that goes. I've yet to use mulberry, but I've read that it can be pretty good and leave a mild, sweet flavor. So this is its 2nd year of growth, and it hasn't given, the 2nd year doesn't do a whole lot, except a lot of the side branching comes from that 2nd year growth. Next to it is 1 year growth hackberry. Okay, and you can see they both hit that height really fast, and then they just kind of branch out to the side. So we're gonna leave that one again because it's 1 year, and I want everything back here to be kind of 2 year rotation. So we're gonna leave this one, and I don't know if the camera hits it, but there's a little one over here we're gonna leave. But then this bigger one you can see behind the barrel, that is its 2nd year of growth. So we're gonna cut this mulberry, and we're gonna cut that hackberry by that barrel. And then there's a smaller mulberry right here. We're gonna cut it. I am probably gonna prune the stem on this other little hackberry over there, but we'll probably cut this, it's more of a coppice over here on this mulberry, and maybe we can kind of prune it up in a manner that lets us still get some higher stems, higher up than what the pigs can reach, because that is really an issue with it. Is the pigs, and back when we had goats, kind of annihilated that thing, and it's come back good. It's, you know, what happens when you cut a tree down that's a mulberry, it just comes back. But yeah, let's hop to trimming these things up. Hey guys, so hopping out here a day or so later. The chainsaw really does leave some pretty rough edges that the loppers don't. And that's not too terrible, but it will heal up a little faster with smoother edges. So going forward in the future, I may go back to the lopper for a lot of our normal work. And for all the ones in the backyard, like you can see how much smoother that is from years prior. And they heal up fine, and then the growth calluses will actually from the next year grow over those and eventually seal them in to make these big knobs. But what I wanted to show you here was what we do for the next step. When we cut off all the big branches off the trees, and I just let them drop that first day, but I'm not able to get to it. And for the willows, we'll then start gathering them up in a spot. We'll really will just pull them out of that, bring them over, and use either big loppers like that, or preferably little hand loppers like this in my back pocket. We'll trim off all the smaller branches there if we're going to do ornamental bundles for people to like put on their table and whatnot, which we don't often do with the native black willow, but it is kind of pretty. Usually we'll do that with like the curly willow or the pussy willow varieties we've got. But all that just goes in a, so like we're working over that and lopping them. I don't have the tripod out here because I'm trying to work, but we'll just trim it right here with one of those big branches. And all of the smaller stuff will usually get sorted off into one pile, the bigger branches off into another pile, and the twigs just drop in the center. And then the smaller stuff, which would be about this diameter, roughly Sharpie thickness, down to pencil thickness at its smallest end. Those will get, when we grab those and we sort those, we just take a 5-gallon bucket, set them in the 5-gallon bucket, and cut them off just past height of the 5-gallon bucket, about 2 inches higher, because the 5-gallon bucket's about 16 inches. So that gives us 18-inch cuttings to sell at about $1 a stick. So a normal side branch, which is what we usually use those for because they have the least amount of little branches, which those will just pop off or we'll trim them off. Those side branches and the very tips of the big ones are where we'll get our normal cuttings that we'll sell to folks for like conservation grade stuff that you're just trying to fill in, or even off the curly willow and pussy willow varieties to plant for actual willow beds, right? And so that's where we'll get all those. Then we're always left with the big branches, right? The big honking things, those center trunks. And that's what we prune those. We used to do about 4 foot, and then so I'd stab them about 1 foot in. But now, because then we can get a couple cuttings from the tops, right? For the normal conservation grade stuff, because we'll go down to like King Sharpie thickness because really those do some of the best. And then so we can take everything down to that, leaving about 4 foot of our thickest stuff for us. Now I'm going ahead and these are all about 6-7 foot. So then when I plant them, they'll be about 5 foot tall. And really what I'm doing here is I'm kind of thinking ahead, because eventually it would be nice to bring Claire's horse back over here. If we ever decided to get any like low line Angus or Dexters or something like that, I'd like to try to keep the majority of the knob above their head height. And they're really only, Annie's, you know, she's a horse, so she's a little taller and she's gonna destroy whatever she wants. But we can at least keep it kind of out of her way. The other ones, the small cattle and everything, we can keep that pretty well out of their way by putting it at about 5 foot high above the ground, and yet I can still work at 5 foot high. That's about neck height for me. So these will go in about 12 inches to 18 inches, and we're going to use these to brace up all our leaky weirs. So I'm going to start planting some of these, and you guys will be able to catch up on the leaky weir side. But that's really all we do to cutting and pruning all of our willows. You know, on the tall ones, they're like this. The ones in the backyard, they get trimmed down to the knob. So that's it. I'll probably do a short for the stuff in the backyard just on time lapse for folks to see and all y'all to watch, but that's really it. That's all there is to willow management and a lot of our other stuff like you saw earlier in this video on the mulberry. That's what it looks like trimmed down, and like I said, that happens every 2 years, and the same thing will happen every 2 years on the hackberries. We did cut that hackberry down. It had 2 years, and that's had 2 years, that mulberry. So now it's zoomed into my fingers. So those will get cut next year, and the mulberry and that hackberry will get left. So then there's always some shade in the summer in that paddock. We're only cutting half of the ones that shade that area, okay? So that's, oh, and we did cut this one. I don't remember if I'd had the camera zoomed in on it, but what I think I'm gonna attempt to do is train that to a like 5 knob pollard, and we'll see what it does. If it goes a little crazy, then next year we'll just cut one of the pollard stems off and reduce the ones that are pollarded. So that's it. That is all I've got for maintaining our willow pollards. Like I said, it's the exact same process for the willow coppices. They're just cut down at the ground versus up in the air. We trim and treat them the exact same way. We get our big tall cuttings for the field, and we get our smaller cuttings that we'll usually sell. This year, I'm going to either leave them to make really tall, or we're just gonna mulch them. I don't, unless somebody reaches out and says, hey, Caleb, I really want some willow cuttings, and you're not in one of those states that I can't ship to, which would be like Washington, Oregon, California, and New York, and maybe Arizona. Yeah, if you're in one of those states, don't reach out. But if you're not, then feel free to reach out, and I could get some, but it would only be within the next week or two that we're cutting these. If not, then that's it for the year. You've got there. It's not like with a pig or any animal. You know, when you shoot, the clock is on to get it fully processed and everything done. With cutting willows, as humid as it is in the spring, I've really got like 1 to 2 weeks after it's cut that I can start processing it, because we leave it in the piles. Everything stays humid. It's raining every couple days here, so it's not that big of a deal. Once you start cutting those cuttings, like you get them cut down off the tree. Whoops. You get them cut down off the tree. You've got a week or two to really get to it, and it won't really, honestly, we have cut some and like use them as posts 2 months later and thought like, they're thoroughly dried, we can use these as posts now, they won't sprout in that spot, and then they sprout. So like, you can still, you've got some leeway, but once you start cutting them into smaller cuttings, that timeline drastically gets faster where you got to use them. So like if I were to do the little conservation grade cuttings, the 18-inch cuttings, those have got outside of water, which what we'll do with those is when they go in a bucket like this, wrapping up, but when they go in a bucket like this, when they're being cut, which these ones, for the big field plantings, I hit them with an axe to put a taper on them. I like 1 to 4 cuttings is what they're going to take. So you just need a taper. The big ones are going to take all 4 sides made down to a point. But yeah, when they're in the bucket like this, there's water in the bucket, about 1 foot of water. So, and this, I haven't added the water yet because I'm literally going out to plant them. But if I didn't think I was going to get to this today, there would be 1 foot of water in the bottom of the bucket. And for the little buckets that have 18-inch cuttings, you just fill the bucket all the way up. And as you're cutting, you just put it in the bucket, okay? Since I'm not doing that, I haven't set that up and I'm not worried about that this year. But kept like that, they'll last quite a while. So then you have several more weeks. But if leaves which leaves aren't really going to start to sprout on these cuttings out in your ambient cold temps At least in the Midwest, you know, we're up further north. They're not really going to start sprouting until it's kind of regularly 50 degrees out. For us, that stuff isn't really going to start sprouting, like the pollards and our willow or our coppices that we cut. They're not going to start sprouting until like May. So, yeah, you've got time. So, all right, now I promise I'm done. Okay, that is all the info you're getting on this, unless you ask specifically in the comments for something I missed, which hopefully I've got everything. Thank you to our Patreon supporters, Raymond and Ashley Hunter. Thank you to all of you that watch our videos, and I hope you get some useful content out of this. Have a great week.